Well, that's a compound question because you're really asking two different things. So let me try and answer the first one, and then we can deal with the second. Probably the biggest in-game advertising has been going on for 10 years. It's the Army. It's the Army game. Okay? There isn't any bigger advertising than that, and probably not one that's been more successful. I mean, how much more successful can you be when you get people to sign up to go and die on your behalf? That's pretty remarkable. So it's not really that new an idea. A lot of people are attempting it in different ways. So I'll give you sort of a unique perspective. In 1986, I went through a friend, I went to the chairman of the Coca-Cola company, the largest beverage company in the world. And I had come out of a media industry background. I worked at ABC for the chairman of the board of ABC. And so I knew pretty much how media buyers view advertising opportunities. It all has to do with calculations in terms of the numbers of impressions. So I worked out the numbers of impressions, and at the time we had just finished a game called Gridiron, which was the precursor to what would later become a rewritten Gridiron, which became John Madden Football, but that's a different story. We were creating something called Wayne Gretzky Hockey, and it was going to be the first physics-based hockey game. And I went to Coca-Cola and I said, I have an interesting idea. Now remember, this is 1986. Why don't we do a deal where you pay my company on the basis of impressions much lower than you're used to paying in standard television media, and I will superimpose the Coca-Cola sign against the backboards in the hockey rink. Very standard. If you've been to a hockey game, that's where they are. In fact, that lends a certain amount of the credibility to it, right?
It even makes the game more realistic when you have real advertising.
Absolutely. So now I was going to put in advertising logos anyway, except I was going to make them up because I wanted to make it more realistic. But then I thought, wow, why don't I do this with real corporations in a virtual world? I started calculating the number of impressions over the average estimate number of games. By the time, now remember that in a hockey game, you get to see the backboards in an inordinate amount of time. Because the camera, even in a three-dimensional space camera, you control the angle plus and minus about 5 degrees. So even when you're doing this, you're always focused pretty much on the background. Now, even though there's a foreground, midground, and background component, the midground is always the board. The number of impressions, by the time I worked it out across, I think we were going to estimate about 100,000 games, which was pretty good at the time, but Gridiron had very large numbers. So we had a reasonable expectation that with the greatest hockey player of all time and that game, we were going to get a good number of sales. The number of impressions was in the billions. Coca-Cola looked at the numbers, looked at us, had no idea what a game was, and said, "You're making this up." And so we said, "No, we're not. Here, let us show you how we calculate it." We went line by line. And they sort of looked at us and said, "Yeah, we don't think there's anything there. Not for us. We wouldn't participate. I mean, where would we be? We'd be on the boards. Well, would you need us to supply you with logo materials to put on the boards? No. Why? Because we're making a virtual advertisement in a virtual hockey game with a virtual rink." Okay? They have no interest whatsoever. Now, years later, there's all this, wow, did you know that you could put an advertisement inside a game? What a concept. Please. So, you have to understand, life is about perspective. So it's not that it's new, it's that it's old, and the people that are highly commercial have children who've now grown up, and they hear every morning at breakfast, oh daddy, I want GTA 4. Oh daddy, I want Gran Turismo. Oh daddy, oh daddy, did you see the Lamborghini? Oh daddy, did you, and so the father looks over the child's, generally the mothers are interested. Doris is one of the few. Not calling you a mother, my dear. But so I was going to say, not even getting there, not going there. But so what it really is, and we see this over and over again in technology history, is that it's not so much the innovation. Innovators always die penniless. I mean, I teach courses in technology history, trust me. Innovators always die penniless. Marconi died penniless. Graham Bell died penniless. All these people that you think made big money. Edison didn't die penniless, but he lost the biggest standards war of his life. So, hey, can't have everything. The bottom line is that commerce has to meld with conceptual innovation. And it never works when the innovation comes out. It's always a matter of time. It has to sort of inculcate itself through a historical comfort that's usually given to the older people by the younger people. So that's all that's happening, really, is that the new chairman of the Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola company have children who play games. And the children have exposed them to this concept of driving inside a game. And, the father goes, look, there's a castor oil ad. I wonder if I could get somebody in my marketing department to put Coke in there. Wouldn't that be a smart idea? Right? And they're very proud of themselves. I thought of that. Well, the truth of the matter is, of course, they didn't think of that. But it doesn't matter, because ultimately, by the time commerce decides to sign on, you're pretty far down the path. So that's the first part of the answer to the question. The second part is it a good idea? Is it going to be equally commercial? Why not? Is the model going to change? Yeah. Is it going to be better for the consumer? Up to a point, because there's a bell curve. So as you were talking about realism, if you're in a driving game like Gran Turismo or something, or even GTA 4, there are billboards. They have real ads in them. Now, to a degree, it lends a certain amount of credibility because it's a duplication of the real world. But what happens, as so often happens, when you go over the bell curve? And they will. They'll go over the bell curve. And what will happen is you'll have a pullback. See? Because a realistic amount of offset economical cost to the user will be acceptable to certain kinds of games players because it's not interfering with their enjoyment of the game. At a certain point where it starts interfering, now you're going to have pushback. And all of a sudden, some smart game developer will go, wow, I've got this new idea. If I have less advertising, I could charge a little bit of money extra because people would get my game without all the ads interfering with the game. And some magazine will write, brilliant! What a concept. A new concept to do away with too many advertisements in games that interfere with the gameplay, making it more realistic. So, nature is a pendulum. And it always hates excess. Physics hates excess. Nature hates excess. Games hate excess. And you have people like Alvy Ray Smith from Pixar, who's a friend of mine, and we were talking one day about photorealism in games. And at a certain point, he believes, and I don't disagree with him, that when you have things that are so realistic, that, I'm looking at you. I'm not looking at a rotoscope of you, I'm looking at you photographically. Now I have a choice to make. I'm in GTA 4. Do I steal your Coke and, hit you over the head with a bat that Doris keeps in her rucksack? And then take your money too? And then you're bleeding all over the floor? And my mother walks in and goes, what have you done? Right? So that's not going to happen either. Because the more photorealistic it becomes, depending on what the subject matter is, it's going to be very disturbing.